Ko Portal Williams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Kia ora. It gives me pleasure to rise and take a call on the Health Protection Amendment Bill, the first reading of this bill. It will come to the Health Select Committee for discussion, which is great. I also am a member on that committee and look forward to doing some further work on it. Firstly, I just want to talk about the timeliness of this bill. Obviously, there's a lot of public interest around the notification of infectious diseases with the recent events which have happened overseas around the Ebola virus. So I think it's very timely that we are looking at the Health Protection Amendment Bill, which I understand from my colleague, the Honourable Annette King, was really a piece of work that started some 7 years ago. So it's great that we have got this finally into the debating chamber. I want to start by looking at the increase in the range of infectious diseases that are notifiable. And I spent a little bit of time today looking through the Ministry of Health's website for the current list of notifiable infectious diseases. And obviously on that list are things like the H5N1, the avian flu, the SARS virus, and Ebola in terms of the viral hemorrhagic fevers. And it's really interesting that there's obviously a list of notifiable diseases that changes and grows as the needs demand. And I recall, on this list, it's very interesting, they talk about Hydatids disease. And I don't know if many of you know this, but I recall as a younger person, much younger person, Hydatids was a we used to have to take our dog to the dosing centre to have the treated through Hydatids. And I was talking to a young colleague of mine, Kurt McLaughlin, today about the Hydatids and having to take the dog along to the Hydatids treatment centre, get him dosed, and come home. He didn't have a clue what I was talking about. It was quite bizarre. But my point about that is, sir, that times change and the way we treat diseases and the treatments available change as well. So I'm very pleased to see that this bill makes provision for allowing the notification of other infectious diseases as we become aware of them, as they become apparent in our communities and as our ability to treat them occurs. So it's interesting. I asked myself the question, what's the purpose for updating this list of infectious diseases that are notifiable? And it's obvious that the reason is that as we become a more global society, as we travel the world more, that the issues around diseases becoming more problematic for our populations and then progressing around the globe become more apparent. We do need some other tools to deal with ensuring our population stays safe and healthy. This bill makes a very salient point around the traceability of contacts of people who are exposed to infectious diseases or who have contacts with others, and it gives some very clear directions to medical officers of health through the district court to make public health orders. So in light of the recent events that have occurred in the United States, for example, discussion about what's required for public safety has to be balanced against what is reasonable for people to be able to carry on with their lives normally. But I know that in terms of what's happened around the recent Ebola events, of course, that many of the issues that have occurred have been around breaches of standard infection control procedures and the measures that are required for those specific diseases. So this bill talks about the medical officer of health being able to give certain directions, and those directions are, of course, that the individual who is infected must participate in counselling, must refrain from carrying out specific activities, there are restrictions about where the individual may go and who they may associate with, where they are specified to reside, and who may be required to supervise them. The bill also provides for adding some other notifiable infectious diseases to the list. We've already heard they include gonorrheal infection, HIV and syphilis, and that means that we will also be able to collect and track the prevalence of these diseases better. We also, under the provisions of this bill, around the contact traceability of folk exposed to these diseases, there is a very important provision around ensuring that the information of the individual is kept private, because one of the barriers to people coming forward when they are infected is the fact that they will be exposed to public scrutiny. So it is really important to note that one of the important provisions is around ensuring that the information for these individuals is kept private. The third aspect of this bill, which is very important, relates to the use of artificial tanning providers and services. We're talking about sunbeds and other UV tanning services not being able to be provided to people under the age of 18 unless by specific prescription. We have had voluntary regulation in place up until now, and that doesn't seem to have had an awful lot of uptake, sir. Many of the services haven't complied. And given our attitude in this country to the outdoors, it does us well to ensure that we, when we're exposed to sunbeds and tanning clinics, which provide a very heavy dose of UV light at a short period of time, but it is quite an intense light, sir. In this country, given so much of our recreation is in the outdoors, we're exposed to an awful lot of UV anyway. And I'm reminded of a story a friend of mine talks about, where every summer he exposes his children to at least half an hour to an hour of sunlight in the summertime because he wants them to brown up before they go out and play. And before he puts sunblock on, I think our attitudes in this country towards exposure to sunlight and UV are not in line with the detrimental effects that overexposure can cause. You know, we do spend a lot of time in the summer outside in the sun. Often our children are running around with their unprotected skin. We often don't think to put sunblock on. So we have a culture in this country around it being permissible to tan and even to burn, and that's not good in terms of our rates of skin cancers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Australia, on a visit recently, I had the chance of visiting some health organisations who talked about what employers have in place in terms of their employees who work out in the sunshine. And they provide the personal protection equipment for their employees, which includes long sleeve shirts and long trousers. If those employees were here in New Zealand, they would generally be out in the sun working in all sorts of weathers in shorts and t-shirts. So the Australians have taken a much more useful approach, I believe, to supporting workers and just being really smart about being out in the sun. So if we match that lack of real attention around being out in the sun and exposure to UV, it is really useful that in terms of going to sunbeds and tanning clinics, we make some regulation around ensuring that our young people aren't overexposed to UV light. To sum up, Mr. Speaker, Annette King was involved, I think, in the introduction of this bill in 2007, and it's taken the government a long time to get to this bill into the debating chamber. And I'm sure that the government takes, the infection control seriously. And I believe that responding to pressure from Kiwis in relation to recent events regarding Ebola has potentially push this bill into the House, but I look forward to having this bill come to Select Committee. Thank you, Mr Speaker.